Hi, my name is Star Yellowfish, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about my family and also the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians. I'm a tribal member of the Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians of Oklahoma, and I am the Director of Native American Student Services for Oklahoma City Public Schools. I'm married to Easton Yellowfish, and I have two sons. Raynon is 9 and Pacer is 6. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my family, and then I'll tell you about being a Keetoowah Cherokee. I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about my great-grandfather here. This man right here is Reverend Stephen Ossowee, and his wife was Sally Bean Ossowee, and they had 6 kids. My grandmother was the oldest daughter, so she had 3 brothers, and then she was the first daughter, and then he had 2 more daughters after that. So she grew up with a bunch of brothers. My great-grandfather was a reverend. He had 4 congregations, so he had 4 churches that he went to around the counties in near Tahlequah, Oklahoma. They lived in Shady Grove, Oklahoma, and he was considered somewhat wealthy because he had 6 children that he had to provide for. He also had land, and he also had 4 congregations, so he was able to travel to different places in those counties. He also practiced traditional Cherokee medicine, which back then, if you think about it, modern times, there is also this disagreement sometimes between traditional ways and Christianity. But he was able to balance both Cherokee medicine and Christianity. So that, to me, was very, very forward thinking. And he raised his children to be able to do those practices as well. This picture here is a picture of their house that they built. This is him, and this is my dad. He actually raised my father. So even though this was my dad's grandfather, and in Cherokee we would call our grandfathers our doo-doo, my sons call my dad their doo-doo. Even though this was his doo-doo, he represented his father. He was his father figure. So my dad was really influenced by this man. This is a picture of my grandmother. This is her when she was younger. She was a really nice lady, very, very cordial, and held a lot of Christian values. But all her pictures, she looks very stern, so it can be a little bit misleading. So we always tease her about that. This is a picture of her 2 sons. My dad is in the background, and then that's her youngest son. My dad's name is Leon Ossowee, and my uncle's name is Kenneth Ossowee, and my grandmother's name was Beatrice Ossowee, but she didn't like her name, so everybody called her B. So she, to me, was like a modern day single mother. She raised 2 boys on her own. She was an amazing quilter, and I'll show you some of her quilts here in a minute. She worked in a clothing factory most of her life. She only had an 8th grade education, and she was a devoted Christian, but she also, to me, was like a modern day herbalist. She could walk into a forest and tell you what all of these different plants meant and how to use them to heal yourself. So I learned a lot of those things growing up, just little tricks of the trade, and I think she learned that from her father. She was the oldest daughter, but she had 3 older brothers, so she was kind of a tomboy. So we really enjoyed that as young kids. She would, play softball with us, and she was very active. One of the things that Cherokee women are really good at and pride themselves on is quilt making. They make these patterns by hand, and then they quilt the whole quilt by hand as well. That's kind of a lost trade now. A lot of quilts are made by machine. So I brought some of my quilts today. This big one down here, this is called a double wedding ring. She made this for me and my husband when we got married, and it took her a long time. So she actually gave it to us after 2 years of marriage, but still it's the thought. So it's really big, it's a queen size, and she did all of it by hand. She also made this one. These 2 are really fluffy, and they're really soft, and you can tell that I haven't used them a lot. However, these few quilts, these 2 are my baby quilts. They're so thin and worn, totally vintage, but she made every block herself, stitched all of this herself, and then quilted it. but it's been used and worn so much as a little girl that that they're so flat and soft. And the same for this one. I remember carrying this around till I was probably in the 6th grade. So that's kind of her craft and what she was really good at. And then this is my parents. My parents are here in the upper corner. That's my dad, Leon Osawee, and my mom, Linda Osawee. And then I spent a lot of time with my grandma, and that's me and my 3 siblings with her. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my family, how we are able to record our records all the way through, even to those that came before the Trail of Tears. Our family came to Indian Territory before the Trail of Tears, before Indian removal. And I'll talk a little bit about that as a Keetoowah person, what that means. Okay. So for Cherokee people, there are 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes. And the first is Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Here in Oklahoma, when people say they're Cherokee, we mostly think that they are from Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. It's a very large tribe. They don't require blood quantum, they only require descendancy. And so most Cherokee people here in Oklahoma, we will associate that with Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. The second tribe is my tribe, the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians of Oklahoma. They are also housed in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. So there can be a lot of confusion. What Cherokees call themselves, if they're part of UKB or Keetoowah or the Keetoowah Band, we will typically call ourselves Keetoowahs or Keetoowah Cherokees, just to make that differentiation. And then the third federally recognized tribe is actually in North Carolina, and it's the Eastern Band of Cherokees. So there are 3 federally recognized tribes of Cherokees. We all speak the same language. We might speak the different dialect. We have lots of similar outfits and traditions and foods, but our history is what makes us different. I want to tell you a little bit about the basics of Keetoowah people. They would call, traditionally they would say Anikaduaga, which if you slow it down, it sounds like Keetoowah is the proper pronunciation. But for the tribe and for people, they spell it Keetoowah, so Keetoowah. But it's pronounced Keetoowah or Anikaduaga. Keetoowah was the name that was given to, Keetoowahs believe that that is the name that was given to us by the Creator. The story is that the 7 wisest men, 7 wisest Cherokee men, fasted for 7 days on top of a hill, a really high hill, or peak or mountain, and that is what the name they were given to them by the Creator. Our original homelands are in the southeast of the United States, so Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. We had a number of Keetoowah towns, but our main town was called Keetoowah Mound, and it was here that they created laws, and they also had the first fire. Fire is really important in the Cherokee tribe, and especially for Keetoowahs. And Keetoowahs have also been known to be the most traditional of all the Cherokees, very conservative in our Cherokee ways, and we really hold on to all of the old ways. Also, our tribe has been a society, I would say, not a federally recognized tribe, but a society since the early 1800s. We were formally recognized by the United States as our separate tribal sovereign nation in 1946. And there are about 14,000 Keetoowah tribal members. Sometimes when people learn how many there are of us, they're really surprised that our tribe is that large. But there are 14,000 Keetoowah tribal members. Most of the tribe is full-blood, about 65%. They are full-blood Keetoowahs or full-blood Cherokees. But you have to be 1/4 Keetoowah to be, or 1/4 Cherokee to be a tribal member. And that's very different from Cherokee Nation. Some other things that make us different, I like to describe the difference between Cherokee Nation and Keetoowahs because there can be some confusion. We're all Cherokees and we're actually all in the same town, or our headquarters is in the same town. So one of the main differences is that the Keetoowahs traveled to what was Indian Territory prior to Indian removal, prior to the Trail of Tears. I'm not sure how our ancestors had this foresight, but my family was one of them. One of the original Keetoowah's families to come over was a John Hare family, and I was told that our family comes from that group. And so this family and these groups of families and people, they all migrated together before they were forced. So our family came here prior to Indian removal. So that's one of the differences. When they got here in Indian Territory in Arkansas and northeast Oklahoma, they settled along the Arkansas River. So they already had their community set up well before the forced removal. And then one of the third things that makes us very different than Cherokee Nation tribal members is that many of the Keetoowahs are descendants of the Nighthawk Keetoowah Band. The Nighthawk Keetoowah Band is a secret society and a traditional society, and when stomp dances and ceremonial ways were outlawed well into the 1960s and 70s, they still practiced these ways, you know, in the dead of night, in the woods, and they were just very secretive. So a lot of descendants come from the Nighthawk Keetoowah Band. So those are three big differences that Keetoowahs differentiate themselves from Cherokee Nation tribal members. Let's talk about our tribal seal. For most of our tribes, you can learn a lot about that specific nation based on their tribe. And this is what our Keetoowah tribal seal tells us. First, the rings, the green ring and the yellow ring, all those little black symbols represent a fire. There are 7 pointed fires. Fire is really important to us. And they represent the 30 original Keetoowah towns. The center represents the mother town, but also represents our sacred fire, and it also has 7 points. The seven is a really important number. There are 7 clans for Cherokee people. And the 4 stars on the outside represent the 4 cardinal directions. And the oak leaves around the fire represent the strength of Keetoowah people. So you can learn a lot about the Keetoowah people based on their tribal seal. Next, there are 7 clans that I had previously mentioned. Those clans are Bird, Wolf, Longhair, Paint, Blue, Wild Potato, and Deer. I am a member of the Bird clan. A lot of Cherokees will be members of the Wolf clan, but I'm a member of the Bird clan, and I haven't met a lot of Cherokees. And when I do meet them from the Bird clan, I'm related to them. So they would be my kinfolks. These are just some Cherokee words. I tried to list some of the first words that I learned as a little girl. I learned a lot of animals and a lot of food, so that was important to me. My grandma was a fluent speaker. My dad is a fluent speaker. And then for our generation, we understand a lot of commands. There's about 2,000 Cherokee speakers left in Oklahoma. So our language is surviving, but they're wanting to get to where it's thriving. So I was fortunate enough to have my dad as a speaker, but I wasn't fortunate enough that he would speak to me all the time where I would pick it up fluently. Just so some of the words that I grew up with, so frog is willos or willosi, cat is wessa, fish is ajat, potatoes is nuna. I feel like nuna was my first word. Corn is selu, grandma is ilisi, and yellow is delonigi. And if I was to meet another native person and they weren't Cherokee, I would say they are Ayawiya, which is they're Indian, but I don't know what kind of Indian. So my last name now, my married name is Yellowfish. It used to be Osawi. So if I wanted to say Yellowfish, I would say Ajak delonigi, which is fish that is yellow. If I wanted to say star is Nooks. So I would say Nooks Ajak delonigi, which would be my name. Star Yellowfish.